South Africa over the last couple of years have been travelling around the world and just kicking ass. This series against India is obviously causing all sorts of problems for Indian fans, but let's look at this from a South African point of view. It's just another success. And if you look at the last few years, that's all they've been doing, is going around and being successful. Coming into this last game, Rushline suggested that South Africa had a 30% chance of winning the game, which I think is a fairly normal, respectable figure considering even, India's recent form. But not for the first time, or even the second or the third. South Africa has completely obliterated realistic expectations of them. And I've been thinking about this a lot. Are we living in the greatest ever era of South African cricket? Overthrowing cricket's empire is just another cricket history book, but this time written from the other side. Get your copy today. I think for most people, when they think about South Africa being a really good side, they go back to that Graham Smith era, right? That's the one that really changes everything. We've worked that out as 2006 through to 2014. In that, their test record is absolutely bananas. They played 27 series and they have 2 losses. I mean, it really was an incredible period where they were even better away from home than they were on their own pitches. They were just a machine when it comes to men's test cricket. However, if we're looking at South Africa's best ever era, don't we also have to think about the women's side as well? And it turns out in this era, the women were not particularly good. In fact, the women's side from 2000 to 2014 just sort of dropped away from the best teams. They'd never really shown that they're up there, but at least in the year 2000, they'd made a semi-final. After that, they didn't really do anything. They were very, very ordinary for a long period of time. When we look at the men's ODI team and then also T20 team in that period, on paper and in bilaterals, they did very, very well. And then every time they had to go to a World Cup, they did not do particularly well, very consistently. So if you're saying this was a great period for South African cricket, you're kind of putting all the emphasis on the fact that they were really good at one thing. And they were great at that thing. That is one of the best test teams that has ever existed. However, they were pretty ordinary at everything else. Let's go back a little bit further. In fact, let's go back to a test team that Cricket South Africa don't even claim as one of their own. But in 1905-06, that is the first success that South Africa ever have. And they absolutely destroy an English side. They win 4-1, and they'd never even won a test match before. And they do it with leg spin. In fact, it's not even right to say they do it with leg spin, they actually do it with wrong spin. But the point being is this was an incredible moment for South African cricket. And realistically, they don't become a consistent or a good side until like the 1950s. And since we're in the black and white days, let's have a look at 1965-69. This team is often talked about as one of the greatest ever teams that was ever assembled. But of course, from 69 onwards, they did not play because of apartheid. They defeat England 1-0, and that is away from home. And then they play Australia twice. The first time they beat Australia 3-1 and embarrass them a little bit. And then Australia come back a couple of years later and they beat them 4-0. And you look at that side and the batting that they had and the bowling that they had and just how strong they were. And you wonder if they would have gone on to dominate cricket. But between 1965 and 69, these are the only 3 series they play. And one of the reasons that they only play in these series is that they refuse to play against India, Pakistan, and the West Indies. New Zealand have also decided not to play against them. So essentially they isolated themselves. It's a great record, but also they beat England 1-0, which is good. They beat Australia 3-1 and then 4-0. But both of those series were at home. So yes, it looks like an incredible team on paper that we never got to see the most of. But at the same time, kind of did that to themselves. I have to put the 94 to 2000 team on here because otherwise your uncle's going to be really upset. Chances are, if he loves South African cricket, it is from this period. They started off this run by going 1-1 versus Australia. They actually did it twice. Now this is before Australia were the best team in the world, at least on paper, because the West Indies still existed and Australia hadn't travelled over there. But this is Warne and McGrath. Right? This is the era of which they're about to go on one of the greatest runs that anyone's ever done. And South Africa played really well. Drawing a test series in Australia was no thing. And then also, it wasn't as if Australia went back and just blitzed them. This is a really, really good result. And if you look in this era of test cricket, they were absolutely incredible. They played a lot of series and they just didn't get beaten that often. So that's red ball cricket. And it's really, really good. The issue is, of course, that they also had to play white ball cricket. The 99 World Cup is in this period and most people will probably already know what happened, but South Africa are probably one of the best teams ever to turn up at a World Cup and not win it. And in their case, they might also be the best team who never even made the final because they were knocked out in the semis. However, if we're talking about white ball cricket in this period, there's a couple of things that are also worth mentioning. In 1998, South Africa actually managed to win 2 trophies. Both start as C. They won the Champions Trophy with the team. We've done whole videos on just how unknown a lot of these players were. And then they won the Commonwealth Gold as well. And that was maybe such a shocking thing that the men just never played it ever again. But that does mean that their white ball team had a little bit of success. So the issue with both of these is that no one really cares all that much about either of them. Certainly not the Champions Trophy back then, when it didn't even have the name that it has now. And even in this era where the Champions Trophy is at least more known, it's not always played when it should be or taken that seriously. And the Commonwealth Gold, of course, comes with caveats as well, as not all the teams are involved, and the West Indies obviously split up, and all these different things. But that is a level of success. On top of all that, in the year 2000, the women actually made the semi-final of that tournament. They certainly weren't a powerhouse sort of around that era, but they did have one very good tournament, which obviously wasn't all that common for them at that stage. So this is a very strong era. But let's get to the current one as well, because I think that's worth having a look at. They have lost 1 test series since the start of 2022, which is a pretty impressive record, all things considered. I wouldn't say that they're dominant or an incredible side, but it's hard to argue that they've been playing really good cricket. Now, let's just remember that 1 series does come with an asterisk, and the reason for that is they essentially forfeited it to New Zealand. They just sent over the worst side imaginable because they wanted the SA20 to be stronger. So other than that, they've been fantastic at Test cricket. Since the end of 2022, they've lost 1 Test series. I wouldn't say they've always been dominant or incredible, and obviously they've had some issues with their batting. All of these things are absolutely true. But that 1 series they lost was also a foot when they decided to go and play New Zealand without, what do you call them? Test cricketers. They didn't take any of those with them because the SA20 was on. So they've been a really good side over the last few years of Test cricket. I don't think anyone would doubt that, because they also have won the World Test Championship, which is obviously just a huge thing because it is their first major ICC trophy that they've ever won, and also because it came at the same time when we weren't even sure that they wanted to keep playing Test cricket, right? So this was a huge thing. They played brilliant cricket, they got themselves into a good position, and then they overcame Australia in the final. Already, that is one of the best things that's ever happened to South African cricket. But if only losing 1 series to a forfeit, the World Test Championship isn't enough for you, how about the fact they've just gone to India and won 2-0? Clearly the Indian side's going through some issues at the moment that they need to work amongst themselves. But even so, no one had their series marked down as South Africa to win 2-0 before it started. It is an incredible achievement, and they have done brilliantly well again to get it. Even going home 1-1 or 1-0 up would have been incredible, but 2-0, magnificent. Now, even through all this Test cricket success, of course, we still have to look at ODI cricket. But in that, they have played in 3 finals, which is pretty good. I think any team in that period of time would take that. Obviously, the men in T20 probably should have won theirs. And for the women, they also went in as favourite versus New Zealand. But that also means that in this short period, they have been in 4 major ICC finals. Now, sure, there is a little bit of overlap here because suddenly there's men's and there's women's and there's so many different competitions and they're all playing at the same time. Great. But South Africa have never been in a major ICC final before. And then in this period, they've been in 4 of them and won 1. That's still a huge step forward for them. So just talking out loud, it does feel like this might be the greatest ever period that they've played in. But the only way to really have a look at it is to get a little bit more granular. So we have made a graph here of all their best periods, right? And then I wanted to look at them by different kinds of metrics. Men, women, red ball, white ball, which I think makes a lot of sense. But if you look at this 1905-06 period, which really is only here because I like to talk about Aubrey Faulkner, they don't really have all that much success. They're good in the 1 Test series that we talk about, and obviously they're good in the red ball, but they don't have a women's side at all. They don't play white ball cricket, but realistically, there's no way that this one can win. 65-69 is a little bit more interesting. The men's team was incredible. The women's team, by the way, don't actually play in this era, but I had a look at them around this era. They weren't very good. They were obviously very good with the red ball, and they don't actually play any white ball cricket. Had not actually been invented yet. From 94 to 2000, their men's team was very strong. Their women's team makes it first ever final. They're very good with the red ball and they're very good with white ball cricket. I think this is a very solid period when you look at South African cricket. 2006 to 2014, the men are very good. The women are not. They are brilliant with the red ball, but they are terrible with the white ball. It's obviously an incredible period where they become the best test team in the world, but that is more or less all they do. And now you have this incredible current period of success for South African cricket. Their men have been incredible. Their women have been incredible. They've been great in red ball cricket. They've been great in white ball cricket. So this is a good place to start. But there's one other thing that I think is also worth looking at when we're looking at the history of South African cricket. And that's how they go against Australia. So in 05-06, they don't play against Australia. But there's no doubt that Australia was a much better side back then. In 65-69, they kick Australia's butt twice, both times at home, but even so. In 94 to 2000, it's quite interesting because they have those two really good series, but remember they draw both of them to begin with. They don't actually win them. And by the end of the 2000s, you have that 99 game. And as far as the women go, the Australian women's team was much better. I think this is probably like a half mark. From 2006 to 2014, they have some incredible moments like beating Australia in test matches. But of course, they also do a lot worse than Australia in men's and women's limited overs cricket. Again, I think this is probably close to a half. And so then you have the current era. They obviously haven't played a big, long test series against Australia in this period, but they did beat them in an ICC men's major tournament final. Like, that sounds weird enough as it is because of South Africa's history. But to beat Australia, I think, is even more important. But then you factor in the women. Yes, they haven't actually gone on to win a Women's World Cup, but they have outperformed Australia in a couple of tournaments in a row. Again, that doesn't feel like a statement that we would normally say. I think this is definitely a tick. This era is quite thin compared to 06 to 2014 or 1994 to 2000. Like, it's not particularly a long one at the moment. But the last 4 years in South African cricket has seen winning and success at a level that we have never even seen anything like before. If their men's team was good, their women's team was basically non-existent. Earlier, they could do it in bilateral cricket, but by the time it got to a major ICC event, it all fell apart. Now, almost everything is going the right way for South African cricket. They've definitely been better at test cricket before, and they had great sides that they never capitalised. And there was certainly a period where they picked up a couple of minor trophies. But when you factor in men's and women's cricket and everything that's gone on for South Africa over the last couple of years, this is by far the greatest era their country has ever had on the cricket field. Are you as chronically online as Moses Enriquez? Then here's another video for you. Or if you also like books and stuff, you can buy my new one on the art of batting. If you loved this video, hit the bell icon to be notified for more.